As we stop to remember the inspired revolutionary moments of 1776, let's also stop to remember the Esopus Muncie of our own region. And remember the Atherhackton people of what's now Hurley, and the Wiltmeet people of what's now Marbletown, and the Aqua people of what's now New Paltz, and also the people of the village of Mamanokwe, the female sachem of the Esopus Muncie, who lived in what's now Rosendale. And let's remember that they had to choose sides between the Americans and the British in that war, or leave their homes. Many of them choose to join the Americans and fight to preserve their natural freedoms. Let's also remember that the Constitution was inspired by the great law of peace of the Haudenosaunee of the Iroquois, and that the Bill of Rights was inspired by the concept of individual sovereignty of the Algonquin people.
Good morning, everyone, and happy 4th of July. I'm Edward Shelwer, one of the organizers of the annual reading. Today is our first virtual reading of the Declaration, and I hope it is the last virtual reading, so that next year we'll all be back in the theater together. Thank you, Evan Pritchard, for the land acknowledgement. I'd also like to thank the crew of people who helped put this together. That includes Pam Cray, the editor, Justin Payon, tech director, Ann Citron, Free at Last, Carrie Wyckoff, and Laurie Childers. Today we will hear the voices of 20 people from our community, people from all walks of life, young, old, all types, people who make our community strong. Their names will be at the bottom of their reading, so you'll know who they are. Then they will be followed by Carew Thompson, who will read an excerpt from Frederick Douglass's What is the 4th of July to the Slave? And then we will conclude with Laurie Gross and Fraser singing our old favorite, This Land is Your Land. Since you're at home, everybody, you can sing along, sing loud, open your windows, turn up the volume, and let the neighbors hear. So, to continue, I want to thank the Rosendale Theater Board of Directors for letting this happen, and our sponsor, Bluestone Press. So, next up will be Laurie Childers, who'll give a few remarks, and then our Ann Citron, who will welcome you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
Thanks to Ed for the hard work of putting this event together. We are fortunate to have leaders like Ed, willing to put community before comfort. The Bluestone Press is so honored to help facilitate this discussion of government's role in our community and America more broadly. When people say, now more than ever, they're making a point about feeling real discomfort with whatever particular situation is of the moment. But in the true arc of history, there has never been a better time and place to be alive than right now in America, man or woman, young or old. It is always uncomfortable to be breaking the trail of human progress. We are not perfect, far from it. Certainly the process of giving birth to this nation is ongoing, messy, heartbreaking, and painful. But the progress is being made, and for this we can thank the aspirations that are laid out in the Declaration of Independence. The ideas of the Declaration are bold. They say that for the first time in history, people have the right to rely on the consent of the governed, meaning that the legitimacy of government relies on the participation of the governed. This is the basis for a powerful tool. A churning mass of humanity will constantly be reinventing itself. The static constructions of power that our forefathers rebelled against gave no currency to the people, no mechanism for constant adaptation. As we go about our day, let whatever feels uncomfortable, unjust, or undeserved serve as a reminder of our blessing to live in a country in this community where we can and must constantly change. Let us not look at America as complete and imperfect, but instead as perfectly incomplete, a place that is fortunate to be guided by principles of renewal and rebirth. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Good morning. Every year we read the Declaration of Independence at our theater to a full house. It was written at a particular time and represents how the founding fathers thought about society at that time. This is a different time, and a time to evolve, to acknowledge our past, good and bad, and move on in the spirit of inclusion. There's a line in the Declaration that has always been very difficult for our readers and our listeners to hear. It describes, quote, merciless Indian savages, unquote, and we reject that line. We leave it in because it's important to see where we came from so that we can know where we have to go. We honor our Indigenous brothers and sisters. We honor women and people of color, none of whom were included in the original document. Freedom can be attained when we look our history square in the eye for what it is and where it has taken us. The words of Angela Davis lead us in the direction we need to go. Now attention is being turned towards the symbols of slavery, the symbols of colonialism. And of course, any campaign against racism in this country has to address, in the very first place, the conditions of the Indigenous people. I think it's important that we're seeing these demonstrations, but I think at the very same time, we have to recognize that we cannot simply get rid of history. We have to recognize the devastatingly negative role that that history has played in charting the trajectory of the United States of America. And so I think that these assaults on statues represent an attempt to begin to think through what we have to do to bring down our institutions and re-envision them, reorganize them, and create new institutions that can attend to the needs of all people. Much of the document we are about to read burns brightly in our hearts, and with good reason. Getting out from under the oppression of tyrants is a giant step on the road to freedom. We need to walk the rest of the way with fortitude and courage until that road expands to a place of freedom and justice for all.
From a letter by John Adams to Abigail Adams, July 3rd, 1776. This day will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward, forevermore. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet, through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth all the means, and that posterity will triumph in that day's transaction, even although we should rue it, which in trust in God we shall not. In Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America.
When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume the powers of the earth, separate and equal station, to which laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people.
He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone, and for the tenure of their offices, and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out of their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislators. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murders they should commit on the inhabitants of these states.
For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English law in a neighboring province, establishing barren and arbitrary government, render it at once an example and fits instruments for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
He has plundered our seas, ravished our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioner of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontier the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we've petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence.
They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states.
That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Lyman Hall, Georgia. Button Gwinnett, Georgia. George Walton, Georgia. William Hooper, North Carolina. Joseph Hughes, North Carolina. John Penn, North Carolina. Edward Rutledge, South Carolina. Thomas Hayward, Jr., South Carolina. Thomas Lynch, Jr., South Carolina. Arthur Middleton, South Carolina. John Hancock, Massachusetts. Samuel Chase, Maryland. William Parker, Maryland. Thomas Stone, Maryland. Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Maryland. Richard Henry Lee, Virginia. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia. Benjamin Harrison, Virginia. Thomas Nelson, Jr., Virginia. Matthew Thornton, New Hampshire. Francis Lightfoot Lee, Virginia. Carter Braxton, Virginia. Robert Morris, Pennsylvania. Benjamin Rush, Pennsylvania. John Morton, Pennsylvania. George Clymer, Pennsylvania.
James Smith, Pennsylvania. Caesar Rodney, Delaware. George Taylor, Pennsylvania. James Wilson, Pennsylvania. George Ross, Pennsylvania. George Reed, Delaware. Thomas McKean, Delaware. William Floyd, New York. Philip Livingston, New York. Francis Lewis, New York. Lewis Morris, New York. Richard Stockton, New Jersey. John Witherspoon, New Jersey. Francis Hopkinson, New Jersey. John Hart, New Jersey. Abraham Clark, New Jersey. Josiah Bartlett, New Hampshire. William Whipple, New Hampshire. Samuel Adams, Massachusetts. John Adams, Massachusetts. Robert Treat Payne, Massachusetts. Elbridge Gerry, Massachusetts. Stephen Hopkins, Rhode Island. William Ellery, Rhode Island. Roger Sherman, Connecticut. Samuel Huntington, Connecticut. William Williams, Connecticut. Oliver Wolcott, Connecticut. Matthew Thornton, New Hampshire. And this is our Declaration of Independence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought strife and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizen, to mock me by asking me to speak today? What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
Well, that concludes our program, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us, and I want to thank our readers and all the people who were involved in making it. I can't wait till everyone can get back into the theater for our regular programming, and next year, let's hope we'll all be back in the theater for our annual reading of the Declaration of Independence. Happy 4th of July!
Hi everyone! So this 4th of July, it feels more important than ever to be singing this song with all of you, everyone. So please sing along.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me, and in the skyway, I saw below me that golden valley.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
I've roamed and rambled and followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
When the sun came shining and I was rolling and the wheat fields waving, the dust clouds rolling as the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
As I was walking, I saw a sign there. And on that sign it said, no trespassing. But on the other side, it didn't say nothing.
That side was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
In the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I see my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking,
is this land made for you and me? This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can make me turn back.
This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.